Chapter 2. Arrival.
6th hour, 18th day, 1st month, year 807, post-Heavenfall. In a tiny room on top of a small bed, a young woman with dark hair and a pale complexion rested on her side, with a book propped open in one hand. Her eyes swiftly read each word as her mind formed images and voices detailing the latest encounter of the trickster bard, Laz Ragenault. The room was shaded by indigo curtains, with slivers of the sunrise revealing the walls to be a faint eggshell colour. Despite the lack of light, Ariya Malanti had no issues reading, thanks to the ocular features her people had evolved to see in the dark, albeit with a slight loss of colour and contrast. She was a Lunar Elf, one of the many Sophont races that inhabited the world of Haven. Aside from the pointed ears and bright irises resembling those of a cat, her people were physically similar to humans in many other ways. Before Ariya could continue the novel, there was a knock at her door. She ignored it at first, hoping it was either by accident or unimportant. However, a second rapped, and a male voice beckoned a response. "Lady Malanti?" the man asked politely.
Yes?
She replied, and tilted her head towards the entryway with alertness. "I apologise if I've disturbed you, but Ovyliax is within sight, and we will be landing shortly." A pulse of excitement flashed in Ariya's heart, and she stood up to unveil the curtains. Bright daylight entered through the window, but her eyes quickly adapted to the change with minimal discomfort. What was before her was the sight of a green, fertile landscape that stretched for miles until it reached the borders of a bay. The water shone a copper hue under the rising sun, and the two features were joined, like a button, by a white-stoned Gothic city with 3 distinct tiers divided by thick walls. Yet its most eye-catching feature was Sunglory Keep, which had 4 massive towers connected to a tall central structure and a faint halo of light surrounding its upper reaches. Ariya had read and heard many descriptions about the holy capital of the Algartha Commandery, but to see it for herself for the first time was nothing short of impressive. Many of her fellow Edenvalians would scoff and call its architecture crude and primitive, but she found it to be charming in its appearance of indomitable resiliency. The fact that Ariya was aboard an airship 400 feet above ground made the view even more breathtaking. She had been travelling aboard for over 3 days and could not wait to disembark. Determined to make a fashionable first impression, she freshened up in the connected ablutions chamber before debating on clothes to wear for her. Ultimately, she settled on a silk dress that could arcanely shift sky blue or white depending on the intensity of the sun. On top of it was a thin jacket of similar material, but had a fading teal gradient and was embroidered with silver designs of fayish flora and fauna. Ariya looked every bit the part of a young, aristocratic Edenvalian, but the black scabbard of the sword tied to her sash almost betrayed the elegant outfit. After approving her appearance in the standing mirror, she packed the remaining items into a wheeled storage trunk and knapsack before leaving her quarters. The halls bustled with activity as other travellers prepared to leave. A couple of small children noisily raced each other up and down the corridor while she passed by a cracked door where a woman was scolding her husband to hurry. When she reached the exit of the cabin area to the deck, a set of double glass doors swung open with the pull of flanking guards wearing curved armour of interlocking carapace. Ariya smiled politely at them as she walked onto the windy deck, dismayed at the chill her attire could not withstand. She had considered stopping for a moment to pull a thicker cardigan from her trunk, but instead tugged her jacket tighter and walked to the edge of the deck. As Ariya approached the railing, a familiar voice called out to her from among a crowd.
"Lady Malanti, good morning,"
spoke a tall elven man with medium-length golden blonde hair and amber eyes.
"The sunrise is radiant, but I believe it has competition now that you have stepped onto the deck."
Ariya recognised him as Riffion Marikoth, Grand Councillor of the Commandery of Edenvalia. He wore an ostentatious set of armour that had gems incorporated into the plates, as well as a cape that looked as if it had taken centuries to embroider. Grand Councillor Marikoth, Ariya bowed out of respect for his title. I am deeply humbled by your kind words. I apologise deeply for not having a chance to speak to you this entire voyage. Even in transit, matters of the state somehow managed to be a bother. The military officers accompanying him smiled at the remark. There is no need to apologise. I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to accompany you on your diplomatic mission. My father is grateful for the fortunate timing. Yes, he had spoken to me after one of our meetings about you going to Ovyliax at the turn of your 82nd birthday. I highly congratulate you for passing the Sentinel's entrance exams and realising the call to your second awakening. It feels like not too long ago we caught you sneaking into our meetings when you were a little girl. By the Celestial Administrator, did we have to re-evaluate our security? Hopefully, my son gives me little apprehension when the day comes when he reaches the age of independence. The airship began to slow as its engines quieted and the hull angled itself towards the designated docking tower. Nevertheless, Marikoth continued over the clanging noise, adding you as a passenger was no trouble whatsoever, and the least I can do for your father. I hope the cabin was comfortable for you. It was, Ariya nodded. Splendid. If it was anything less, I would have had a word with the captain or requested a different ship. A mechanical walkway of metal extended from the spire and locked on to the hull of the ship. Once secured, the first of the passengers began to disembark, with the councillor, his entourage, and Ariya behind them. They followed the crowd to the tower's entrance, where a large lift awaited them. Inside was a dim room with a stone platform and open cables connected to pulleys at the corners. To her surprise, she unexpectedly felt humidity in the air and noticed small puddles had formed on the floor. Curious about how the Ulgarthans engineered the lift? Any guesses? Marikoth asked as the lift filled with more people. Ariya shook her head. Most people would think it's the cables, but they're there more for stability. We're actually standing on water. At its mention, the lift began to descend, and Ariya saw the layers of stone the platform moved past were slick with moisture. They pump the copper bay into these towers to control it, the councillor revealed. Not as efficient as the teleportation circles of home, but quite ingenious, I must admit. The lift descended for a few minutes before reaching its destination, where a heavy bronze door impeded them from moving further. After some echoing of clicking and clattering, the door swung open and revealed the grand lobby. Vaulted ceilings displayed paintings of the heavens, populated by both celestial beings and radiant dragons. At the centre of the floor was a circular fountain, affixed with a statue of a woman in armour. A golden halo shined behind her head as she stood in a relaxed but commanding pose. Almost everyone in the hegemony recognised Saint Ovylia Victrix, founder of the nation and the leader of the crusade which took the land back from Aboleth thralls 800 years ago. A descendant of her name, alias Victrix, currently sat as head of the state as the 81st elected hegemon. After Ariya finished appreciating the serene visage of Saint Victrix, she bowed again in farewell to Marikoth. Thank you for accommodating me, Grand Councillor. The pleasure is mine, Lady Malanti. If you need anything, do come by the Hegemon's Keep if your schedule permits. How long will you be staying here? Marikoth sighed. However long it takes to negotiate a reasonable deployment of Eden Valia's forces to counter the resurgence of Aboleths to the north. Shouldn't be more than a couple of weeks. Regardless, good fortunes to you, and may your lessons with the Sentinels prove to be fruitful. Despite all of the councillor's pleasantries, Ariya noticed there was a faint hint of concern at the mention of the Sentinels. She chose not to press further and said goodbye before descending a nearby ramp into the lobby's foot traffic. The sight from above the city was already impressive, yet the view from the streets was even more overwhelming. Magnificent structures of marble stone soared overhead and were decorated with arches, columns, statues, and reliefs. Crowds of pedestrians and carriages travelled across roads laid out in a cobblestone kept clean by patrolling menials. On occasion, Ariya heard the roar of propeller engines, and she looked up to see one of the sky trams floating across cables to ferry residents to and from districts. Churches, symbols, and acts of veneration dotted almost every block, each devoted to one of the 5 celestial founders. Temples of Tyran doubled as training grounds and courts for paladins and judges, while the houses of Zaylin were administrative buildings for the myriad needs of local bureaucracies. Libraries were adorned with the iconography of Setin, while street bards and poets made sure to dedicate their performances to Amaranth. Then there was the nurturing dragon Lutia, whose figurine was often found on the counter of market stalls or above the doors of places of dining. Like many Eden Valians, Ariya did not believe in the founders' divinity, yet acknowledged their significance in rebuilding civilization and respected how faith could empower others to do good. As she continued, she noticed almost everyone she walked by, from a queue of solemn nuns to the singing merchants, were armed with a blade or weapon of some sort. The sight of abundance in armaments was jarring and uncomfortable at first, yet each nod, smile, and curt greeting from passerbys took strides in settling her trepidation. At one point, a woman even exclaimed how gorgeous her outfit was, which left Ariya grinning with delight. After 30 minutes of roaming the labyrinthine streets, she had finally found her final destination. Before her was a 3-storied building, widened by 2 flanking curved wings, and a front decorated by Doric columns. A brick-patterned courtyard led up to the structure, and its perimeter was surrounded by a 10-foot stone brick wall with a wrought iron gate. On the connecting column was a plaque that read, Sentinel Academy. As Ariya crossed the courtyard, her keen eyes absorbed the lively scene surrounding her. A couple of students sparred with blunt spears, while a few onlookers cheered and coached from the sidelines. Others lazed on the lawn, while another small group sat on a bench, smoking pipes and exchanging gossip. What was most striking, however, was a handsome and athletic man who jogged laps around the perimeter of the academy alongside a bear. The elf couldn't help but be captivated by the juxtaposition of bizarre and adorable, while admiring the individual's physique. She considered approaching to inquire about the bear as a conversation starter, but regrettably couldn't afford the time in her schedule yet. Upon reaching the entrance, she found herself standing in a rectangular chamber with polished marble floors and 2 side walls of jagged black stone, with artificial waterfalls running over it. At the counter ahead was a man with a dark beard, spectacles, and skin tanned from too much sun exposure. He wore a uniform of red cloth, layered on top of a suit of chainmail, and appeared bored with routine, until suddenly noticing her presence. "Founder's blessing, are you here to check into your dorm?" he asked, with alert professionalism. "Yes. My name is Ariya Malanti," she said, as she pulled from her knapsack a small scroll tube with her identification papers and handed it over. "Malanti," the security warden muttered, while looking down at a list and cross-referencing the contents of the container. "You'll be in room 205 on the 2nd floor of the East Wing," he said, before turning to grab a key and a pamphlet from the rows of shelves behind him. "Go straight past me and then make a right. Orientation for new candidates will be at 10:30 hour in the Swordwind Lecture Hall, which is in the central section of the 2nd floor. If you get lost, which does tend to happen, the printed pamphlet has a map, as well as some general details about the building." Ariya thanked the man and proceeded past the front desk into the main lobby. She followed the receptionist's instructions and took the path to the right, but kept a mental note of the doors leading to the art galleries and library. After ascending up an elevator, she navigated to a doorway carved with images of an army descending upon twisted demons atop battle lions. With a low creak of the hinges, Ariya stepped into a large common room with windows stretching from the polished wooden floors to the ceiling. 3 velvet couches surrounded a large rug near the windows, while other sides had choices of a large communal table or smaller booths for additional seating. Adjacent to the entrance was an open pantry with a dumb waiter and a folded card near it reading, "Call for refreshments." 2 individuals were in the room. A half-elf man with dark hair sat in one of the booths and was taking notes from a textbook. The other was a human woman, maintaining a battle axe on the couch. "Well, hello there," she called out. "How are you on this fine morning?" The woman set the axe down with the freshly oiled blade, leaving a wet spot on the cushions. As she stood, Ariya was awestruck by how much the human towered over her from the top of her fiery orange hair. "I'm doing very well," Ariya replied. "It's my first time coming to Ovyliax, and I found it all very grand and exciting." The woman looked at her with a face of very vivid confusion. She then squinted and approached a bit closer before exclaiming, "Oh, I apologise. My eyesight isn't the greatest, and I don't have my glasses or combat goggles on me, so I didn't even notice you were Eden Valian until you spoke. With that accent. The way you say things in common sounds so much rounder. I don't know how to describe it, but it's also my first time hearing it or meeting a pure-blooded elf, so this is exciting." Ariya wasn't sure how to respond, besides sheepishly smiling. "Hey, do you speak Elvish too? Would you mind saying something in that language? Like, tell me your name and where you're from." Sure." She felt uncomfortably put on the spot, despite it being only an audience of 1. The elf recited a basic greeting in Elvish. "My name is Ariya Malanti, and I am from the city of Eden Valia." Wow, I'll never be able to pronounce or understand any of that, but it sounds very pretty. I take it your name is Turia? Ariya shook her head and switched back to common. "No, that's how you say, 'and I am.'" "My name is Ariya Malanti, and I am from Eden Valia," was the full phrase. "Got it. Well, I'm Barnov Kiltskaya, and I'm not from any city. Grew up near the Salavi Mountains to the south." She extended her hand to shake, to which Ariya did the same, and found Barnov's grip to be bone-crushingly painful. "Do you need any help getting to your room?" "No, I can figure it out, but thank you. I'm just going to drop off my belongings and then go to the orientation." "I figured you were part of the newest cohort. I came here 2 days ago, so I'm also new. I'll be seeing you there." The 2 women bid farewell, and Ariya headed to the private rooms. On her way, she caught the half-elf man staring at her before giving a brief nod and returning to his book. Upon entering her room at the end of the hallway, she found herself standing in a 10 by 10-foot chamber with a small bed on a wooden frame and a storage trundle underneath. Beside it was a writing desk and chair, complete with a built-in arcane letterbox and a sliding mirror door open ajar to reveal a narrow closet. The walls were barren and colourless, save for a pair of floating shelves above the desk and a small rack for weapons. Lastly was an adjacent bathroom that connected near her quarters entrance. Ariya dropped her knapsack and trunk in the middle of the floor and removed her sword to put it on the rack. She then sat on the bed and let gravity pull her behind into the softness of the bedding. How malleable and plush the surface was contrasted the firmer and more Spartan mattresses she was used to. Sleeping for over 4 hours was not a necessity for her species and was frowned upon as unproductive. Thankfully, she was not home and relished the fact she no longer had to follow her previous schedule to be awoken by the family servant or an annoyed mother. She then closed her eyes and wondered what her parents were doing while she settled into her new home for the next couple of years.